Well, in 2003, the BBC paused the Brazil Grand Prix to show the following advertisement.
Isn't it nice when things just work?
So this ad only showed 10 times, but it was voted by Adweek as the commercial of the year, and it was deemed one of the finest car commercials ever made, which is interesting because it's unlike most car commercials. There's no dramatic shots of beautiful people in amazing cars doing hairpin turns around beautiful terrain. What it is an intricate arrangement of seemingly isolated parts moving in amazing harmony to accomplish a complex purpose. And there's something marvelous about that. In the end, and that was Garrison Keillor's voice, for those of you who know it, the idea that it just works, well, that's ironic. This didn't just happen. This was millions of dollars and 9 months and hundreds of professionals and 600 takes to get that one shot. And it wasn't the power of dreams that accomplished it. It was the power of amazingly bright and competent people working with great precision and skill to accomplish something that just looks remarkable when you look back on it. How much more amazing is our all-knowing, all-powerful God, and the way that he orchestrates seemingly isolated and even seemingly adverse events to accomplish his intricate, predetermined purposes. And this beautiful truth about our God is beautifully demonstrated in the life of Joseph. And so if you have your Bibles, I invite you to turn them to the book of Genesis, chapter 41, where we resume our account of the life of Joseph. If you're just joining us today, Joseph is the second youngest son of Jacob, renamed Israel, who, although his father's favorite, begins a series of unfortunate events that just seems to go from bad to worse. He is hated by his brothers. He is betrayed by his brothers. He is sold by his brothers to Midianites, who take them away from his family into Egypt, where he is sold into slavery to Pharaoh's chief bodyguard. And then he's slandered by that person's wife. He's falsely sent to prison. And then he encounters Pharaoh's chief cupbearer and baker. He is enabled by God to interpret their dreams, and he says, just don't forget me. And so what do? They forget him, and he languishes another 2 years in prison. All Joseph has done is be faithful. All Joseph has done has been right. And what has happened to Joseph is just one sad event after another, one step downward after another, one seemingly mysterious, unfortunate event after another. Until one day, everything changes. Let's look at that. Now, it happened at the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh had a dream. So the first verse sets the context. It is now 2 years since the last chapter. 2 years since the cupbearer and the baker went, the baker to his death, the cupbearer to be restored to office. And there are 2 full years, 2 long years languishing in prison. It's been 24 months since Joseph interpreted their dreams. It's been 104 weeks since those interpretations have proven true. 730 mornings, Joseph waking up wondering, is today the day of my release? 730 days of having to go about the lot of a prisoner in a hard circumstance, knowing that you're innocent. 730 nights going to bed disappointed, wondering, have I been forgotten? Or did he pass on my request, but it was denied? Am I ever getting out of here? And while Joseph laid his head in prison, Pharaoh lays his head in the palace and has a dream. And behold, he was standing by the Nile, the river. And lo, from the Nile there came up 7 cows, sleek and fat, and they grazed in the marsh grass. So it's a picture of lushness and provision, of this flowing full river and these growing marsh grasses that are being grazed by these fat and healthy stock. But the placid scene is disturbed by what appears next. And then behold, 7 other cows came up after them from the Nile, ugly and gaunt, and they stood by the other cows on the bank of the Nile. A fat cow, a skinny cow, a plump cow, a gaunt cow. And then something truly terrible happens. The ugly and gaunt cows ate up the 7 and the sleek, fat cows. Cow cannibalism goes on. These gaunt skeletal creatures devour the others, which doesn't happen in nature. So this is unnatural. This is gruesome. I confess I thought of the Chick-fil-A cows being accompanied by these zombie cows, and the zombie cows eat the Chick-fil-A cows. It's a disturbing scene, and I hope I don't ruin Chick-fil-A for you. And Pharaoh woke up, and one wonders if he woke up in a cold sweat, breathless and in panic. This was a nightmare, but it was a dream. And after a bit, he calms down and dozes off again. And in verse 5, he fell asleep, and he dreamed a second time. And behold, 7 ears of grain came up on a single stalk, plump and good. So another picture of a rich harvest, of abundance, of plenitude. And then behold, 7 ears, thin and scorched by the east wind, sprouted up after them. A sign of long drought, of some disease, something that has eaten all the edible parts of the corn. And these bare ears, like the former, swallowed up the 7 plump and full ears. The gaunt ears swallow up and devour the plump, edible ears. And Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. It was a mysterious dream. It was an unsettling dream. And so Pharaoh feels compelled to seek an interpretation. And so in the morning, his spirit was troubled. And he sent and he called for all the magicians of Egypt. Now, don't think David Copperfield or Gandalf. Think of the oracle in the Matrix, someone who interprets signs, someone who is a diviner of dreams. And he doesn't just call 1 or 2, he calls all of them. I need help understanding what it is that's happened because people view dreams as significant, as symbolic. And along with the magicians, he calls all his wise men, his sages. Once the interpretation is made by the magicians, I need counsel what to do about it. And so he calls not just 1 or 2, but all the wise men. He calls his council together. And Pharaoh told them his dreams. But of all the magicians, none could interpret, and of all the wise men, nothing could give him counsel. No one could interpret them to Pharaoh. And then standing in the wings of the throne room, watching this scene, is a familiar figure, a familiar face, a familiar voice. And the chief cupbearer, who had formerly been in prison with Joseph, says, I would make mention today of my own offenses. Pharaoh was furious with his servants, and he put me in confinement in the house of the captain of the bodyguard, both me and the chief baker. We had a dream on the same night, he and I. Each of us dreamed according to the interpretation of his own dream. and a Hebrew youth was with us there, a servant of the captain of the bodyguard. And we related our dreams to him, and he interpreted them for us. To each one he interpreted according to his own dream. And just as he interpreted for us, so it happened. He restored me in my office, but he hanged him. So the cupbearer, who had failed to mention Joseph for 2 years, now sees this as an occasion. Pharaoh's anxious. Maybe he's angry, and he says, my master, I must confess something that happened to me. You were angry with me. You imprisoned me. I had a dream, and there was this Hebrew youth that was able to interpret the dream for me. Now, there's a number of things going against Joseph at this point. We learn later that the Egyptians won't even eat with the Hebrews. So there's a racism. He's a foreigner. He's a slave. He's a prisoner. He's a youth. There's no reason you would want Joseph's opinion on this matter. But Pharaoh's disturbed. And so he sent and he called for Joseph. And the servants hurriedly brought him out of the dungeon. And when he had shaved himself and changed his clothes to make himself presentable to the king, he came to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I have had a dream, but no one can interpret it. And I have heard it said about you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. And Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, it is not in me, but God will give Pharaoh a favorable answer. Joseph once again denies any special ability on his part, even though this might have been in his favor. Because he could have said just about anything, given any interpretation, and maybe would have gotten him out of jail. But once again, as he had done before, he said, it's up to God to interpret dreams. But he senses that God will answer Pharaoh favorably. He senses the hands of God in this. And in verses 17 through 24, Pharaoh recounts his dreams again. And then in 25 through 32, Joseph interprets them. God has shown to Pharaoh what he is about to do. Behold, 7 years of great abundance are coming in all the land of Egypt. And after them 7 years of famine will come. And all the abundance will be forgotten in the land of Egypt, and the famine will ravage the land. And so the abundance will be unknown in the land because of that subsequent famine, for it will be very severe. Now, as for the repeating of the dream to Pharaoh twice, it means that the matter is determined by God, and God will quickly bring it about. So the 2 dreams are really one dream reinforcing each other. They both give an indication, 7 cows, 7 ears, 7 years of great abundance, of abundant harvest, of tremendous crops. There's going to be great fertility and fruitfulness in the land. But then coming hot on their heels is going to be 7 cows, 7 ears, 7 years of tremendous famine. And it's going to be so extreme, so severe that it's going to ravage. It's going to literally consume. The same word used of the cows consuming the cows, of the ears consuming the ears. It's going to consume that, so no one's even going to remember the good times. No one's going to remember the flapper days of the mid-20s because the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl days are going to follow on their heels. And we're not even going to remember how good it was because of how bad it's going to get. And the fact that you had 2 dreams, it's not just going to happen. God, the true God, is about to make it happen. And he's told it because it's coming soon. Joseph did what none of the magicians could do. He interpreted the dreams. And now Joseph goes on to do what the wise men couldn't do. He's going to give Pharaoh counsel. Now, before we look at the counsel, let's consider a little bit the audacity of Joseph to dare speak to Pharaoh. Now, if he had been looking out for his own self-interest, a question was asked, the question was answered, maybe I'll get out of jail. How dare this youth speak to Pharaoh? How dare this foreigner advise the Egyptian king on its domestic affairs? How dare this slave speak to the most powerful man on the planet? And yet that's precisely what Joseph does because that's what God sent him there to do. So let's look at the counsel. Let Pharaoh look for a man discerning and wise and set him over the land of Egypt. We need a point person for this special project of preparing the land for what's about to occur. And then we need a crisis management team. Let Pharaoh take action and appoint overseers in charge of the land. And once you have the captain of the team and once you have the team assembled, here's what they're to do. Let him exact 1/5 of the produce of the land of Egypt, levy a 20% tax in the 7 years of abundance. Let them gather all the food of these good years that are coming and store up for grain for food in the cities under Pharaoh's authority, and let them guard it. Let the food become as a reserve for the land for the 7 years of famine which will occur in the land of Egypt, so the land will not perish during the famine. During these 7 good years to come, let's make hay while the sun shines. Let's levy a tax, gather them in silos next to the field, next to the cities that are going to become distribution centers to be able to be famine relief when the crisis arrives. Prepare now for what is coming. And despite the dubious source, Pharaoh heeds it. And he says, the proposal seemed good to Pharaoh and to all his servants. Now, what happens next is one of the most remarkable reversals in all of biblical and human history. But let's pause for a little bit to consider what happened and what led to this happening. How did a humble shepherd come to be in the presence of the most powerful person in the planet? Well, by God using the hateful hatred of his brothers and their betrayal to remove him from Canaan into Egypt. How else would you get a lowly shepherd, this anonymous, humble boy, into the presence of the most powerful person in the world at this time? How did Joseph come to speak Egyptian so fluently that he fully understood and he was able to fully communicate? Well, by removing him from his Hebrew-speaking family, by taking them away from his family for 13 years, and now immersing him in this language training program so that he was fluent in the tongue. How did this foreigner come to so aptly understand Egyptian etiquette? Well, by placing him as a slave in Potiphar's household. How did this person with no business background come to have great administrative and logistic insight? Well, by placing him as a servant, first of Potiphar and then over the jail. How did this nobody come in contact with Pharaoh's chief cupbearer where he could interpret his dream and then be mentioned specifically? Well, by being cast in prison, by being slandered wrongfully. How did this youth, after all these hard things happened to him, be raised to a position of delivering the Egyptians from famine? And not only the Egyptians, but being used by God to deliver Abram's descendants, Israel, from the famine that was to descend on Canaan? By all of the hard, seemingly inexplicable things that happened to Joseph all along the way. When his brothers betrayed him, Joseph trusted and obeyed God. When he was stolen from his family, Joseph trusted and obeyed God. When he was sold into slavery, Joseph trusted and obeyed God. When he was slandered and imprisoned, Joseph trusted and obeyed God. When he was forgotten and languished in prison an additional 2 years, Joseph trusted and obeyed God. And all the while, God, just like that Reuben Goldstein experiment that we saw in the advertisement, God was taking this young man from being a spoiled child under his dad, from being killed by his envious brothers, and he is taking him from Canaan to Egypt, into Potiphar's sphere, into the throne room, and along the way, he is teaching him the language and the culture and the etiquette and giving him the skills so that when God's timing is right, he is perfectly positioned and placed and prepared to serve as God's redeemer of these nations. How did that happen? God made that happen. If Jacob had been given a dream of here's a disaster that's coming, we need to manufacture a way to get Joseph into Pharaoh's presence and make Pharaoh raise him to the right hand. There's no way that could have been done. There's no human way this could have happened, but God was doing everything. Every moment that looked chaotic and calamitous to Joseph was God's plan occurring exactly on time and exactly according to plan. So now let's look at the reversal of fortunes. Pharaoh said to his servants, "Can we find a man like this in whom is a divine spirit?" Pharaoh recognizes this isn't just a sharp young lad. This is an Elon Musk, a genius in his day. Let's give him charge of Doge. there's something distinct about this young boy because there's something distinctive about the God of this young boy. There is a divine spirit in him. Joseph is the only person in the book of Genesis said to be filled with the divine spirit. And of course, we know whose divine spirit that was. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has informed you of all this, there's no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be over my house, and according to your command, all my people shall do homage. Only in the throne I will be greater than you." Joseph had been foremost in Jacob's favor. He had been given charge over all Potiphar's affairs. He had been placed in charge of all the affairs of the prison. And now Pharaoh himself has raised him to the second place in the kingdom, prime minister, and saying, "You are head over all of my affairs and all my household." Not only this, Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I've set you over all the land of Egypt. You're not just going to rule over my affairs. I'm going to make you prime minister of the nation. I'm going to place you in charge of this kingdom, me accepted." And then Pharaoh's going to give him access to the auto pen and deck him out in royal regalia. Pharaoh took off his signet ring from his hand and put it on Joseph's hand. He didn't just give him a ring. He took the ring from his hand that had the royal insignia that when it was impressed in wax would say, "This decree comes with the authority of Pharaoh." And he gives that to Joseph, whom he's just met. And he clothed him in garments of fine linen. Garments are a running theme in Joseph's life. You remember his father gave him the coat of many colors that made his brothers hate him, and then it was given back to Jacob bloodied, supposedly mangled and mauled by an animal. And then he's given slaves' garments that are seized by Potiphar's wife, and then he's dressed in prison clothes that he's changed out of to be made presentable to come into the throne room, and now he is bedecked in royal linen garments. Chris read for you last week from Psalms about the iron collar around Joseph's neck, this chafing manacle around his neck. What is he wearing around his neck now? Gold necklace. The iron has been placed by jewelry, by wealth. He had him ride in his second chariot. So when Joseph came to Egypt, he was likely tied and trotting to keep up with the camels of the Midianite trainers. And now he's being chauffeured in Potiphar's chariot. And you remember Joseph's early dreams of his brothers and even his parents bowing down before him? Now, all of Egypt are going to be commanded to bow the knee before Joseph. And he set him over all the land of Egypt. All this is happening in a paragraph. All this is happening in a moment. The reversal is so radical. It's so dramatic. It's so instant because God can do that. And when the moment arises, he can take a slave child like Daniel and put him into an elite training program. And then he can raise them up into second only to the hand of Nebuchadnezzar himself. And God can take a circumstance that looks so dire and so dread and raise it up and do wondrous things in an instant as soon as he's ready. But the exaltation's not done. Look at verse 44. Moreover, Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Though I am Pharaoh, yet without your permission, no one shall raise his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt." Your authority is going to be so sweeping, so extensive, so expansive that no one can go anywhere or no one can do anything without your say-so. He's just trying to convey to him, me accepted, you will have complete authority in my domain. And then he gives him a new name. He named him Zaphanath-Paneah, which means God speaks, he lives. There is a God who speaks. There is a God who lives because he used you as his spokesman to speak to me and to prepare our nation. And then he goes on. He gave him Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, as his wife. This foreigner, this youth, this Hebrew, this slave, this incarcerated person, he weds to one of the most powerful families in Egypt. On is a city 10 miles northeast of Cairo. And it was a city where the temple of the sun was, where you worshiped the sun god of Egypt. The Greeks called it Heliopolis, the sun city. So before it was in Arizona, it was in Egypt. And in this affluential thing, the priest, who was very wealthy, very important, very influential, his daughter he gives to be Joseph's bride. He makes Joseph nobility. He's not just making him head of a famine relief task force. He has elevated him to this prominent place and given him a noble bride. And Joseph went forth over the land of Egypt. He couldn't leave Potiphar's household without Potiphar's permission. He couldn't leave the prison because he was incarcerated. He was bound and manacled. His feet were fettered. And now he is fully free to go wherever he wants, whenever he wants, to do whatever he wants with the full endorsement and authority of Pharaoh himself. It's unbelievable. And Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. We know that he was 17 years old when he gave the bad report about his brothers. So he's had about 13 years. So from 2025 to 2012, that span, he's had a really hard life that just seemed to get worse. And those are the years from 18 to 30 that are the bright years, the years of your strength of young adulthood, when he could have been falling in love and marrying and starting a family and developing his own herds and rising in prominence in the family. And instead, he is betrayed, he is sold, he is enslaved, he is slandered, he's incarcerated. And it all changes in a moment. And if at 17, Joseph had set his ambitions on rising to this post, he never could have done it. There is no way he could have manufactured what just happened. But all along, God was doing it. And in the process, he was preparing Joseph. He was teaching him trust. He was teaching him perseverance. He was teaching him skills. He was deepening his faith. He was preparing his instrument to be used when it came time to employ it and engage it. And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh. He went out throughout all the land of Egypt. During the 7 years of plenty, the land brought forth abundantly, just as he had said. He gathered all the food for these 7 years which occurred in the land of Egypt. He placed the food in the cities. He placed in every city the food from its own surrounding fields. Thus Joseph stored up grain in great abundance like the sand of the sea, until he stopped measuring it, for it was beyond measure. So great were the storehouses filled with God's abundance. And while God is filling the storehouses, the silos with abundance, he is also restoring Joseph's heart, and he's bringing healing to what he had suffered. Look at verse 50. Before the year of famine came, 2 sons were born to Joseph, whom Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, a priest of On, bore to him. And Joseph named the firstborn Manasseh, which means he who brings forgetfulness. For he said, God has made me forget all my trouble and all my father's household. All those hard times, all those bitter nights, all those days languishing, it's all forgotten because God has blessed him so greatly. Dr. Fred talks about ladies who go through labor and the pain of all that. And then in a miracle, when they hold their son, when they hold their daughter, somehow all of that's forgotten and they're willing to go through that ordeal again and again and again and again because the blessing is so great. And that's what God does. He heals those wounds. And then on top of that, he gives a second boy that he names Ephraim, which means bearing fruit, because he said, God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. All those hard times, all that suffering, all those trials, all those tribulations, it's all forgotten in light of God's goodness to me now. And even in this place of affliction that I didn't choose to be, didn't want to be, I just wanted to go home. God has not only allowed me to survive, but to thrive and to be fruitful. God has been so kind, so good, so blessed to me. And when the 7 years of plenty which had been in the land of Egypt came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began to come, just as Joseph had said, then there was famine in all the lands, but in all the land of Egypt there was bread. And when all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried out to Pharaoh for bread, and Pharaoh said to all the Egyptians, go to Joseph. And whatever he says to do, you shall do. And when the famine was spread over all the face of the earth, Joseph opened up all the storehouses and sold to the Egyptians. And the famine was severe in the land of Egypt. And the people of all the earth came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph, because the famine was severe in all the earth. Every word that God had said came true. Everything occurred just as God had revealed. And God had prepared them through Joseph. And God had prepared Joseph to be able to serve as his agent of deliverance in this occasion. And not just for Egypt, but for the peoples of the earth, for other people in North Africa and around the Mediterranean world, and the land of Canaan, where there lived the family of Jacob and his family, who was about to be relocated to Egypt, just as God had announced to Abram 4 centuries before. Everything is happening exactly according to plan, and nobody saw it coming until the moment that it occurred. How glorious is our God? How great is our God? You know, at the end of that advertisement, it clicks that little clicker that starts the car that rolls it down the ramp. How much simpler to just click the clicker. We could have cut out all that stuff, all those 70 different parts. But what's marvelous about it is the intricate, precise way that it all occurred. God arranged all this. God sovereignly directed all this. And it teaches us several important lessons today. First of all, God always accomplishes his purposes. God is sovereign, and he always accomplishes his purposes. Every element, every aspect, every electron spinning around, every atom, in every molecule, in every larger piece, up until what the galaxies are doing at the largest sphere, God is in control of all of this. He doesn't just know it. He's just not all-knowing. God is all-powerful, and he is sovereign, and he is directing. There is nothing accidental. And we can look at our own lives and these things that just seem random and haphazard to us, the way that God used those to accomplish his purposes in our lives. God is so great. He is so glorious. He is so big. He is never asleep at the wheel. His hand is never off the stick. He never lets go of the rudder. Though it looks chaotic to us from Earth's perspective, it is all happening according to plan, according to God. So great and big and glorious is our God. Secondly, God accomplishes his purposes in mysterious ways. They often make no sense to us at the time. About 400 years before Joseph, this is what God said to Abraham. Long before Joseph. He says to Abraham in Genesis 15 that his descendants, whom he's going to make as plentiful as the stars in the sky, would be strangers in a land that is not theirs. And there they will be enslaved 400 years. But I will judge that nation whom they will serve, and afterward they will come out with many possessions, and in the 4th generation they will return here to Canaan, for the iniquity of the Amorite is not yet complete. God's plan for Abraham was to bless him and to multiply his seed and to give them the promised land. And if it had been us, we would have scripted this, that Abraham's going to have an abundance of children, and Isaac's going to have an abundance of children, and Jacob's going to have an abundance of children, and they're immediately going to take over the promised land, and it's going to be the great, glorious success story in human history. The way this small civilization emerges and blossoms and blooms unfettered and unhindered. But that's not at all what God did. And he announced it in advance. Yeah, that's still my plan. That's the outcome. But to get there, I'm going to bring them from Canaan to Egypt for 4 centuries. And there I'm going to enslave them from the time when the pilgrims arrived at Plymouth Rock to COVID. They're going to be in this foreign land. But then I'm going to send these slaves out rich, and I'm going to bring them back. And then none of this happened according to anything that anyone could have predicted, and God announced it all in advance. He moves in a mysterious way. God says in Isaiah 55, "As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. My word will not return to me empty, without accomplishing what I desire, and without succeeding in the matter for which I sent it." God is sovereign. He always accomplishes his purposes, but he does so in mysterious ways. And therefore, and this is our third lesson, Because God is sovereignly accomplishing his purposes in mysterious ways, our part is to trust and obey. Our part is to trust and obey. We won't understand most times what's happening. And even if God tried to give us a glimpse of it, our peanut brains couldn't perceive it. Our minute minds couldn't grasp it. We just lack the capacity to be able to grasp what God is doing, even if he were to tell us. All we can do, each of us, is in every place, in every moment, in every trial, and every tribulation, trust God. He is there. He is sovereign. He is accomplishing his purposes. And obey him, even when it doesn't seem to be bearing good fruit. What did Joseph do everywhere that he went? He obeyed, he obeyed, he obeyed, he obeyed. And what happened to Joseph everywhere he went? It got worse, 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 until it didn't. And then everything changed in a moment, exceedingly abundantly beyond all that he would ask or imagine. Like each part in that assembly line, our part is just to play our part. Lord, I will trust in you today, that you are God, that you are good, and that you are in control. Grant me the grace to obey you this day, even if it doesn't seem to be bringing out good outcomes right now, even if I don't understand, even if it seems to just make matters worse. In every place, in every space, in every act, we will trust, we will obey, we remain faithful. We would like to know God's plans for us. Actually, we would like to dictate God's plans for us in such a way that they are comprehensible, desirable, and always involve our comfort, abundance, pleasure, and freedom from all anxiety and pain. That's our plan for our life. That is not God's plan for our life. God's plan is bigger and it's better. He is in charge. He is accomplishing his will. He is doing so in his timing, in his way. Our part is to trust and obey. Would you pray with me? Father, we thank you that you don't just give us statements of doctrinal truth, but you give us biographies of people who had to live them out. We thank you for the lives of Joseph and of Job, of Daniel and of Moses, of Jesus, of those who just seemingly had inexplicable things happen to them. And yet, as we wait a little bit and we look back with the perspective of hindsight, we see that everything was precisely arranged, everything was occurring according to plan, for you are the sovereign God, all-knowing, almighty, all-good, who directs every instant, who maintains every affair to accomplish your will in your timing, in your way. Grant us the grace to be faithful, to trust and obey. And we ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.